So I wanted to introduce what other things we can do with that listening to button click. All right, is one of the very fundamental things. But listening, aside listening to button click, there are other behaviors that you can listen to, even for inputs when people type. Okay, so let's do something here. I want to write an H1 tag. Let me write a text. No, I'll just leave it empty. I don't need to write a text. I'll give it an ID. Okay, an ID is just like with humans, your identity, right? Across this web page, there are various H1 all over, but I want to be able to identify this particular H1 because I want to use it to display something. So I can give it an ID, let's say result. Okay, so I can then, let's call it, and we can call it and assign a value to it just in a minute. Okay. So doing that is also pretty simple. We are starting with documents because that's how it sees it. Okay. Now, because we used ID for the H1, we want to get the element by ID. So get element by ID. Okay, now which element do you want to get? So that's where the name comes in. All right. We called it results. I hope it's single result, not S. All right, yes. Can you just copy and paste to be safer? For the result, dot the text content. All right, because it's H1. So we want to populate it with text. All right. So let's assign a value to it to say, okay, anytime they click on that button, let that H1 write button has been clicked on. Okay, so let's refresh it and see. You see, it's blank at this point. But if I click here, where did it run to? It showed the button I clicked on. You see that? Okay, button I clicked on. Okay, so let me look at. Okay, it's refreshing because it's inside. It's inside a form. All right, so and form does submitting. All right, so let me bring it outside the form and let's look at it again. Okay, so you can see to tell you button has been clicked on. So that is how you capture data or assign data to some of the inputs. Okay, so let's quickly do a simple calculator that we'll just do. Let's do a simple multiplication calculator. So on your own, you can look at how we handle the calculator to do, like I see that you're doing a design on real estate. You can look at how you can use that to achieve maybe a calculator on investment there. If time permits here, I would even, let's look at us doing a page where it will look very nice as a real estate with a calculator by the right-hand side, normal content by the left. Let me just first do the calculator and we'll migrate the code there, okay? So now let's look at inputs. Okay, let's look at this input. We'll give it an ID. This time around, no placeholder. Let's give it an ID as number 1. I'll call it num1 because I don't want it to be num. Okay. Num1 in multiplication. Let me just put X between. I'm trying to say times num2. Okay. Then the answer should show on that. Answer we'll use this, our H1 as the answer. Okay? We'll still use this button as what we use to trigger it. Okay? Again, like I said, we can give this button an ID. Okay, to say submit button, BTN. Let me just, you can use any name as you like. All right. The reason I want to use an ID is if I don't want everything that is button element on this page to just trigger whenever I click, I want to use this, I want only this specific button. I can just use get element by ID. So I'm not going to use this query selector again. All right, I'll just use get element by ID and change to the button name. So if I save, if I run it, you see it will still do the same thing the previous one was doing. Let me refresh it and submit. You see button has been clicked. All right, well, let's go back to what we are doing. We are not finished. Yeah, so we have said put in input 1. This X here, I use it to represent times. All right, then input 2. It can be formatted any way you like. That X really doesn't matter. It's just, for now, I just want to use it as multiplication stuff. All right. So we have our button, we have our 2 inputs, and we have what will display the result. So we are fine. Now let's go to our JavaScript to make that calculator work. So we have gotten the element by ID, the button, to say whenever this submit, this particular button that's called submit button is clicked, do the following. What we want it to do now is to calculate. Okay, so the first thing I will do is to receive the content of that input. Okay, the input that we gave IDs. Okay, the inputs that we gave IDs. The first thing we want to do is to get their content. So the first is num1. So let's declare a variable, say, what do we call that variable right now? Let's call it, or let's make it a constant because the value does not change all through multiplication. So let's call it constant number 1. Okay, equal to, we want to get the value of that input box, if you remember. So, and we have said the HTML, JavaScript sees the HTML as a document, okay, a hierarchical document. So we'll check the document, get element by ID. All right, you can, there are other ways that you can do this, not only get element by ID, there's get element by class. You can also use that query selector as well, you know, but for this, the sake of what we're demoing, we are going to use get element by ID all through. Okay, it still works. You don't need to use everything as a developer. You can just use the one that works for you. Okay, so get element by ID, I think we call the first number num1. Okay, dot value. So this should fetch the value of the first one. Okay, so let's also get constant number 2. No space. When we are giving the constant of variable the name together, the worst case you can do is to add an underscore to separate them. Okay, but there should be no space. So I'll do the same thing, get document.get element by ID num2. We'll verify that these names are correct. This num1 and num2. Let's go up and see, but it has to be exact. Okay, see the ID for the first one, see the ID of the second one. So I think we are correct on that. So we'll scroll back down and do the needful. Okay, now we want to query. There's something also important that I want us to look at. You know that these are numbers, okay? And for multiplication, if the person doesn't type anything, for example, now, it's going to crash. It's going to type show an error because it's going to be seen as a string, all right? So, for example, someone on the website here, instead of typing 1 times 2 might type in a letter, all right? Even if we can restrict it in the type of input, I will show you that too. But we also have in our JavaScript to add that validation, all right? That anything they type that is not number, turn it to 0. Okay, so let me come back to our way. The way we achieve that is for JavaScript, numbers are seen as are classified as float, FLOT. So I'm going to pass float. I'll just put this thing that we type in brackets. So basically, I'm typing anything that comes from this as float. So the same thing I will do here too. All right. So looking at earlier when we were looking at the data types, we talked of numbers. Numbers can be of various types. You know, there is decimal numbers. Okay, that's what we call float, the ones that might have decimal point. Integer numbers are the ones that will not have. So if I pass this as integer, if you type 1.2 in that calculator, it will round it up to 1. If you type 1.5, it will round it up to 2 in the calculation that it's going to do behind the scene. You know, so it's clear that integer might not work for this kind of calculator in case someone passes in decimal point. That's why we use floats in that situation. All right. So I've used floats now to convert these numbers, the inputs to numbers. Okay. Now we also want to check if it is empty. Okay, if any of them are empty. Well, let me leave that for now so that I don't confuse you. Let's first do the basic. Maybe in our next class, we'll then look at the if-else statement. Okay, but now we have captured the two numbers. The next thing we want to do is we want to do the multiplication. All right, so we want to do the multiplication. If a user enters the first number, enters the second one, then do this and show us the result. Okay, so we can declare if either a variable or a constant, whichever one suits you. Okay, whichever one suits you. But for me, I'll use a variable because it's results that we want to display. So I can even declare the variable up here first. Let result be blank. Let it not contain anything. All right. So here I would say result should be equal to our calculation is multiplication. Yeah. So number 1 times number 2, and I close it. I'm able to do this now because I've already converted the numbers to float here. If I didn't have this float, I will add it here. Okay, wait, let me just show you what I'm trying to explain. So if I'll comment out this two line. So if I didn't pass it as float while I was capturing it, let's say I just collected it from the ID directly, the input ID correctly. For multiplication to happen, for JavaScript to see it as a number, I must still have to pass it as float here. So I will do pass float number 1, pass float number 2. I'll still get the same result. It's not going to be different. All right. So why I did it the first way, the first time, is so that the code is a little bit tidy. Okay. But the two ways are correct. None of them are wrong. Okay. So let me go back to the previous one. I prefer that one. It looks neater in the eyes. Yeah. So we have gotten our answer and we have assigned our answer to results. Remember here, there is an element, one H1 element at the top that we call result. It can be any name or can call it, okay, let me change it to my result. Okay, I'll just copy it and paste it there. So I get the element by ID, my result. So change the text contents now to result. Okay, so if I go, our simple calculator should be able to do our multiplication right now. Let me refresh it. Say 2 times 3. So there you see our answer, 6. All right, so if we go 10 times 3, 30. So whatever you want to do, whatever, even if it's a fraction, because we use float, it's going to be. But if I use the integer, you will see what is going to happen. Okay, so integer will round up. Okay, integer, or rather it will cut off the decimal side of it. Okay, so if I say 1.5 times 2, you see it will be like 1 times 2 to cut off the decimal part. Doesn't care about it. In fact, integer doesn't even round up, doesn't care about anything decimal. If you like put any decimal thing, it's going to wipe it off. So that's why for multiplication or anything arithmetic calculation, we rather use float. Okay, because it takes care of decimal points too. If you want now to decide to round up, yeah, you can round off either to 2 decimal places, 3 decimal places, as you like, right? Let's say 89 times 4. Okay, so you see our calculator. So if I were to do some other form of calculation, you will see that with JavaScript, I can achieve it. Now, let's create one web page. I'll create a web page. Let me call it real estate. Real estate with HTML. I want to now do a combination of what we have been learning with the JavaScripting and some other styles. So HTML head, let's put a title. Okay, real estate calculator. All right, then body. Now on the body, we'll do arrangement I would like to do is to put a page banner at the top first, just like what Marshall shared in the group. So let's put it, but for me, the kind of page banner I want to put it as a background via CSS. Remember on our external sheet, we did one where we put a background image as the background of the container. So I'm going to do that. Let me write it in our external CSS. I'll call it ID. Okay. You can either use class. I don't know if I spoke about class in our last CSS class. There's a class, there's ID. All right. This difference between class and ID is unique identifier. It's like your identity. All right. An example is what we just finished with JavaScript. The button given a specific ID, no other button can have that kind of ID. If you put that same ID for another button to throw an error, there is class. Yeah, so there is also class. Okay, you can get elements by class. All right, I can call this submit or anything. But the only difference is for class is reusable. Many elements can have the same class. So that's the difference between class and ID. So for here, let me use class. Class is represented by a dot. So I will call it dot banner. That will be our page banner. It will be the image, the background image. All right. Let me give it a height of say 50%, a width of 100%, background image, said we'll use URL, image is in our images folder. So, sorry, somebody asking a question. Okay, images slash my image is what I'm trying to get now. Images slash real estate. Okay, images slash real estate. Okay, you observe what I did here. I put a 2 dot. Usually in our normal HTML, here, I don't add the dots. The reason these two dots is here is I'm saying come outside the folder where I am. You know, this CSS file is inside a folder of its own. All right, so if I'm starting from images directly, it's expected that this folder should be inside the same place with it. But because the images folder is not in the same place with it, we are saying come out of this folder to the next level. So you see that once it comes out from the folder, to see the images folder. All right, so that's where the two dots. If it was inside like some other folders, maybe that you need to come out twice before you see the images folder, I'll put a two dots slash another two dots, so it keeps coming out till it gets to the level of where the images folder is. All right, is that clear?
Yes, sir.
All right, okay. So this is a class that I've written here now. I will go now to our real estate page. On the home side, I talked about a div. We did experiment with a div the last time. All right, so I can call the div class banner. Okay, save. Let me open this up on the browser. Real estate. Okay, yeah, real estate. All right, so you see that it's not showing yet on the page because I had not referenced. You remember what we did like with the index? You must have to reference the style sheet in your web page, the header. Okay, so I reference it now. Let's see what happens. Real estate is still not picking it up yet. Okay. So our class is banner, and this will go into the CSS style sheet. Okay, we save that. Let's just bring it out. Let's debug it. Bring it out to the inner style here and see. Let's make it an inline style to debug what the issue is. So arrange this. Okay. Let's make it the same. Single quote and then the style. Okay, let's see if this will show it. Okay, so I guess a single quote might be carried back. So those are some of the kind of debugging that you might need to do once in a while as a developer. If I remove this style, let's see if it can see it. It's not seeing it, it means it's not linking correctly. Okay, so it's not linking correctly. Style sheet. But so that we don't waste time searching for that, let's just go ahead with the inline. I'll do it inline so that we'll continue. What I just want to show you is how the calculator can function. For this CSS, we can look that up later, but let me do an inline CSS. Okay, banner. Okay, now because the image is small, it's forming in tiles. But you can make it not to repeat itself with background repeat. No repeat. You can, so there's a whole lot that can be done with CSS. Like I told you, as you're working, you keep seeing new commands that you need to use. All right. There's background size, cover, right? This is to make it straight and cover the entire screen, even if it's a small image, right? You can also do background positioning if you like. All right. So let's also copy something from any of the previous styling that we have done before. Let's say title. Yeah, let's use this H1 styling. H1 style. Let's give it a title. Welcome to our real estate calculator. Right. You can change this color to something else, blue violet, whichever the color you like. Let's also change the font family, something that looks better. All right, so welcome to our real estate calculator. The next thing I want to add is a div, a parent div, and some child div inside it. Now, this parent div, I'll give it a, if you remember, one of the things we learned during the styling is display. That display can be block, can be inline, it can be flex. Okay, so you can look up our videos, the earlier one, to understand. Inline is to make it on the same line, or inline block. For block is to keep it like it occupies the full width. All right. While for flex, anything you put inside a div or a container that is displayed as flex arranges the things side by side, gives it equal space. Okay, it just arranges it by default equally. So what I want to do is to do a div that will split the screen into two, left and right. Okay, and we will style it with margin and the rest of it. Okay, just a minute. Let me. All right. Okay, you're good. So let me do this style to add width. Let this take 40%, or let's make it 60%. It's going to hold information. All of these that I'm doing is what you're familiar with. It's just right now putting one or two things together. I'm trying to form the page. We have about 9 minutes to quickly wrap this. 60% is what I wanted to do. Sorry. Then let this take maybe 30%. 30%. Let's put some text in there to say, let's see where they start from. Okay, when we refresh, you see where this is and where this is. So let's now use margins and padding. Let's give it a margin of, let's say, 20 px or 10 px, and a padding of, let's say, 20 px. I'll do the same for the other one. Okay, fine. So let's also give this side like a border. Okay, a border of 1 px solid border and a gray color. There's also a styling for border radius. You want it to be curved a bit, or you want it, how much you want it to be curved. It's called border radius. So I would use 10. You'll see the effect that it will give to the border. You see it's here, the edges are curved. So I'll use there for the calculator, I'll use here for just the text. Sorry, I'm going to rush this because of our time. For the text, I will just paste some random things that might not even. Okay, then our calculator, which is our main thing we want to do. So we want to get the user to impute. Okay, you can say enter amount you want to invest. Okay, let's put that in a line break. All right. All this depends on how you want to arrange it yourself. I'm hooking it across a paragraph, right? Because simple. How many years do you want to invest? Okay, I'll also use a line break for that. Then we put in a button to say calculate or something. We'll leave the button name as submit button size. Calculate returns. Okay. Yeah. So you see this calculator, let's also add maybe one H1 somewhere or anything to show the result. Well, I prefer using an H1, so it's big. Okay, let's call it ID returns, or let me call it results, because returns could be a keyword. My returns. Okay. So now we're going to use our JavaScript like we have done in the first. I'll just copy this and I will explain it. Don't forget, we say towards the ending of the body. Just write script open and close. That's where JavaScript works. All right. So we are saying now when get element ID button, submit button. So when this button is clicked, add listener, okay, to know whether it's clicked. If you say it's clicked, then let's do this. We first declare the results to say, okay, let's create this container for me to accept what the result will be. All right. Number one is, let me change the name to amount AMT. Then the second input, I'll change the name to, AMT amount. The second input is years, or number of years. All right. If you observe, you see whenever there is a new, like a sentence joined together, I start the first letters with capital letter. Only the beginning is small letter. Off, O is capital, yes, Y is capital, right? So the same thing you should do whenever you want to give IDs and all that. It's good for good practice. Okay, so the amount the person wants to invest, let's capture it. The number of years they want to invest, let's capture it. So let's say our interest rate is 20%. Let's declare a constant. Or returns. Okay, constant returns percentage. 20% is 0.20, I believe, a number. Okay, so the investment return will just be the number of years times the number of years you want to invest times the returns. Again, if you observe, you see I didn't have to put pass float for returns because it's already a number. I didn't put it inside. If I put it inside parentheses, then it's a string that it's become. It's not a number anymore. I will need to use pass float to turn it to number. Okay, but now I'm not putting it into parentheses, so it's a number. Okay, so my returns is where we want it to display. My returns. Okay, so when we submit this button, we expect that it should show the calculation for the real estate investment person wants to do. Right? How much do you want to invest? I want to invest 1 million naira. How many years? For 2 years or less than 1 year. So calculating returns is saying 200. So I'm going to make extra 200,000. Now, if we want to show the person everything plus your investment, your capital plus the interest, like I said, we can add it also here. Okay, can make it this. I'll put this in bracket, like board mass. Anything in brackets is the first that executes. Okay, so plus the investment amount. All right, that's all. I'll come here. Let me refresh again and say we've done 1 million for 1 year. Calculate. So you see it's 1.2 now. All right, so this is just a simple calculator that you can explore, and you can see the way we handled our web page too. So it's all on your creativity and what you think. All right, but this is what JavaScript can do on a web page. You can get to practicalize a lot of stuff. You can make interactions happen. Okay, like I said at the very beginning of the class, it's like a base, the base rock for most of the programming languages and all that. Because eventually you can inject JavaScript into any programming language of your choice, whether Python, .NET, C#, whatever language, React, and the rest. Okay, so I think this is the much that we'll be doing for today. We can go through the class so that we understand over and over again so that we understand most of the things I've said. Okay, and we do the practicals. It's important that we start from the very first one. If you have not done your first practical to the second to the third before this, you need to go back and do all of them because they are all interconnected. All right, they are all interconnected. So thank you, everyone. If you have questions, you can drop on the group. All right, I would respond to them. Okay, thanks for your time. And I hope this actually did justice. Okay, thank you. Have a great day.
All right, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
All right.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.